More than 9 months after his arrest and after 6 weeks of trial, we could finally know the fate of Sean Diddy Combs by the end of today. In just a few hours, deliberations will continue. Jurors in his federal trial say they have verdicts on 4 of the 5 counts, but the judge wants them to keep on working. NewsNation's Alicia Nieves is outside the courthouse in New York City. Alicia, good morning. Does the jury think another day of discussions will break the deadlock issue?
Yeah, that's like the million-dollar question here. It's the answer that everybody wants. The reality is, unless you're one of those 12 jurors, there's no way to answer that. You know, right now, we do know right at 9 o'clock, in just a few hours from now, those 8 men, 4 women who will decide the fate of Sean Diddy Combs, they are going to kind of pick up where they left off yesterday, and they're going to try and at least break the deadlock in what is the most serious and certainly most complicated charge of this trial. That is a racketeering and conspiracy charge. We know yesterday, of course, they deliberated for about 12 hours, and as you pointed out a moment ago, they arrived on a verdict for the charges here. 2 counts of sex trafficking and 2 counts of transportation of prostitution, but couldn't agree on RICO, the racketeering charge. A jury note submitted to the judge said that there were jurors who were, quote, unpersuadable on both sides. That means there were jurors who think that he is guilty of RICO and they're not budging, and then those who are equally adamant that he is not guilty of RICO and racketeering. Now, instead of accepting a partial verdict, the jury was given what's known as an Allen charge. Essentially, the judge instructed them to continue weighing the charges, give it another shot to try and reach a unanimous verdict. A short time later, the court received a second note from a clearly exhausted jury saying they need a break. They were done for the day. They want to come back today and continue deliberation. So our producers who have been inside this courtroom throughout this entire trial say, you know, the atmosphere inside court during this deliberation period has really been tense, especially when that first note was delivered. They noticed a noticeably, exasperated Sean Diddy Combs, who slumped in his chair and bowed his head when it was said that, you know, the jury has at least have a verdict and they have a unanimous decision on some of the charges. The reality is, for Sean Diddy Combs, a lot at stake here, right? If he's guilty or found guilty of that RICO charge, he's facing life in prison. If he is not, obviously he gets to go free and then he has to deal with the other charges. But there's a potential here for a mistrial, meaning that if they cannot, they're a hung jury on this RICO charge, the prosecution potentially, although most unlikely, could retry him. Of course, Sean Diddy Combs, pleading not guilty, and it's very likely by the end of today we could know his fate. Nick?
Alicia, we will be watching Alicia Nieves live in New York City. Alicia, thank you so much. Let's bring in National Trial Attorney and Criminal and Civil Attorney Donte Mills. Donte, good morning. You and I have had this conversation before on other cases. In terms of Sean Combs' charges, the theme we've been hearing throughout the trial is the racketeering charge is the most complicated and clearly is difficult for the layperson to understand, and it's difficult to prove. No surprise that the jury is deadlocked on this one. What do you make of all this?
It does make sense, Nick, and good morning. Always good to have these good conversations. We're talking about these cases that are happening in real time. Here you have a jury who had to decide 2 things, essentially. Personally, was Sean Combs responsible for some criminal activity? And then, was he guilty of the RICO charge, which made it a conspiracy? It seems as if they have answers on the personal guilt of whether or not he sex trafficked and transported people for the purposes of prostitution. We don't know if that's a yes or a no yet, but we don't have an answer from the jury on whether it was a conspiracy, whether he set up Bad Boys Entertainment or hired all of these employees to further that, or if this is just something he did on his own.
And Donte, you've watched this. You're watching how this jury is struggling with this. Did the prosecution make their case?
That was the toughest part of the case, because, Nick, when we're looking at the trial and the testimony that came out, even the prosecution brought in the accountant for the company, who said, we made sure everything we did was by the books. This was not some kind of business set up for the purposes of some criminal activity or other illicit activity. This was a legitimate business. It just so happened that the person who ran this business had personal proclivities. And that's what the defense was arguing this whole time. This was just sexual preferences for Sean Combs, not a criminal enterprise. Now, does the jury believe that those sexual preferences led to criminal behavior where he said, I'm going to make you do this by force or coercion? That's really the ultimate question that we'll find out soon.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.